Ladies and gentlemen, honorable speakers and guests, in the next minutes I would like to introduce the European Investment Bank and what are our activities and our priorities in order to support the blue economy, especially in the main transport investment projects and SME support. The support in order to create wealth and employment generation in the different countries. The EIB is the EU bank, the bank from the European Union. It was created in 1958 by all EU state members to finance the development of Europe and to assure the cohesion between the different regions of Europe. Today, we are the largest lender and borrower in the world. All 28 member states hold a part of the share capital in the bank. We are a AAA institution by the three major rating agencies, which allow us to finance at advantage conditions that we have to pass to our final beneficiaries. If we compare a lending portfolio with all the supranational banks, we are fairly the biggest one. We are the largest supranational institution and one of the biggest in Europe. Also, when we look at the main, we are just behind the five main countries of the European Union. If we look at our share capital structure, all of the 28 state members have a portion of the bank. Germany, France, and Italy, and the UK have the biggest portion, all no more than 16.11%, and then followed by Spain with 9%, and Belgium and the Netherlands. The rest of the country has a smaller portion. We work to promote sustainable growth and job creation in Europe and beyond. If we look at the figures of our support in 2016, we see that our biggest portion of over 40% has gone for SME lending. In second place, we see our historical role to support infrastructures, both in energy and in transport. And finally, we also see that since the last years, we see a big support for environment. We hope that by 2020, at least 25% of the EIB support will be supporting projects which have an impact on environment, a positive impact. Finally, in the last years, we've also started to support innovation because we think that that's the future. When we look at Eastern neighboring countries, we want that by 2020, the portion of environment support of our projects will come up to 35%. If we look at all the overall EIB support during 2016, we have provided the whole group more than 83 billion euros of new support on projects, of which more or less 10%, without any reason, but around 10% has gone outside the European Union. This support has gone mostly for EFTA countries and Eastern and neighborhood countries, both in the Eastern region and in the South, in the Mediterranean region. When we look at the support that we have provided in Eastern Partnership, which most of the countries of the Black Sea have received this support, we see that they have received since 2010 over 7 billion euros. By looking at the countries, Ukraine by far has been the biggest recipient of our funds, followed by Georgia and Moldova. By looking at sectors, we see that SMEs have received the biggest portion of support because we believe that they are the main recipients of the catalyzers of a possible development of all the economies. Also, a big portion has gone into infrastructures, both in energy and in transport, because we support public sector in order to facilitate the private sector development. When we look at marine, how can the EIB support the blue economy and marine projects? Sorry. Well, first of all, what does the transport, what the marine transport represent with all the overall EIB financing transport activities? If we look at the figures of 2016, we see that it represents 10%. However, those figures have been consistent in the last decade, more or less moving across. Secondly, as we can see, over 0.5% of the support goes into transport infrastructure, which goes into rail and roads, motorways, etc. But there is also a high component of municipality support. The EIB has adopted, what's our lending policy? We adopted a lending policy in December 2011. This policy sets the guiding principles and selection criteria that will reinforce the bank's contribution in this sector. In particular, taking into account climate change actions and concerns. The new transport lending policy fully takes into account the European Commission white paper on transport that was issued in March 2011. If you are interested to see that policy, you can see it on our website upon the following link. Here what type of projects can we finance? First of all, the rehabilitation expansion of common user infrastructures in existing ports. However, we also develop new terminals and the development, of course, of new projects, of new ports. The development and the upgrading of inland ports and waterways is also key in our financing. This is justified by the fact that that we believe on the development of an efficient, sustainable, and cohesive trans-European transport network. Additionally, it facilitates the flow of goods and reduce transport times and costs. Finally, transport safety, we can manage to transport safely large consolidated flight volumes of goods. All this support is provided because we consider that it is the most energy efficient and climate friendly of all the models of transport, which is also a priority and a vital part of EU transport policy mix. In this line, we also look at the improvement of inland transport connections, but also new vessels, retrofitting, and vessel research and development. All this without forgetting about climate adaptation projects. I would like to go through the specific requirements when it comes to the financing of shipping projects, because they are key in order that they are eligible for our financing. All shipping financed by the EIB and their EU eligibility should have a EU flag to ensure the European safety operations and environmental norms. The bank finances vessels that are operating to or from an European Union port. Also, shipping projects will adhere to EU and IMO safety and environment rules and regulations. For projects involving the expansion of deep sea fleet, the implementation will result in an overall improvement of the shipping and environmental performance. This figure more or less tries to show the overall maritime lending activity of the bank since 2007, in the last decade, where we see that as the main activity we have been financing seaport installation and river development works and the acquisition of new vessels. When we look at the figures of projects invested in the Black Sea in specific projects amount to 281 million in this period. Okay. It's not a big number because also we are excluding from these figures any projects done in Greece. All these have been projects in direct investments. We have a few operations, 5 operations, but if we look at the final beneficiary of these investments have been Turkey, by far most the biggest one, and followed by Romania, by Romania, yes. If we look at by type, okay, we see that the biggest beneficiary has been in investments, in flow, in digs, in protection and acquisition, protection against erosion, sorry, and also on water transport. In this slide, we have summarized two examples of two projects that they have been financed in Turkey. One was the expansion of the city of Istanbul's fleet of ferries of boats, which was financed in 2006, which is in relation to the shipping sector. And then in ports, I've taken an example which was done on the Aegean coast of Turkey, but also was quite meaningful because it was a project of 130 million for the construction of the container port. When we look at inland waterways projects, we have highlighted 2 here, one financed in Turkey for the Nibulon cereal production and transportation, which we have selected this because it has a high and a strong inland waterway logistic component, which linking into an important Black Sea cereal. Also, the project finance in Romania, in Sulina, is a project for the improvement of the navigation conditions of the Danube Delta. For the moment, we are considering 2 projects in Ukraine. One to support investment in the rehabilitation of the Dnipro waterways, and the second one to support the Ukrainian port authorities in modernizing its operation and asset base. Lastly, I want to talk about SMEs, because I think it's quite important. Beside the real infrastructure investments, the EIB has supported around 63 million euros in the support of SMEs, because we think that they become the economic base of in most countries to generate wealth and generating of jobs opportunities for young people. These tables show that the areas where our intermediated loans have been allocated. As you can see per sectors, okay, transport has been the biggest recipient, although then it's equally distributed between services, industries, and energy. I don't want to finish without talking about coastal tourism. Coastal tourism represents in general an important component of the blue economy. Over the period 2011 to 2016, the bank has provided 866 million euros in intermediated loans for investment in hotel and other accommodation in the relevant countries. This is Bulgaria, Georgia, Romania, but mostly Turkey. This volume, I have to indicate, that is indicative and refers to the total lending of the bank in hotels and other accommodations, because unfortunately we are currently not able to isolate what is blue economy component from the overall lending. However, besides Turkey, most of the support has gone to Turkey, and we could imagine that a high proportion meet such objectives. In the example that we have provided here, it was 2 intermediated loans of 200 million, of which already has been allocated 154 million for coastal tourism component.
Antonio, can I invite you to conclude?
Yes, actually, I was just coming to the last one. And here, okay, the EIB is quite present in the region. We have offices in all the different countries, which we invite you to contact them directly based on the countries that you're representing. And we are recently nominated somebody to take over the office in Sofia, that very soon will be open. Thank you very much for your attention.